aspire to be leaders? Can I see a show of hands? How many of you aspire to be leaders? Wonderful, that's wonderful. A big round of applause for all of us. Leadership isn't easy. But having said that, we don't really have a clear understanding of leadership today. There are thousands of books written on leadership. You go on YouTube, you'll find millions of videos, if not hundreds of millions of videos. There are about 50 scientific journals dedicated just to leadership. And some of them have been foolish enough to publish my work. So that tells you about, But with so much, we get so many different definitions of leadership. Authentic leadership, relational leadership, servant leadership. It goes on and on and on. And most of this research in leadership has been over the last 100 years, which correlates directly to the rise of business schools. Leadership study today is done in business schools. So leadership study today is focusing on managers. And the idea of business schools is to create good managers and, of course, make managers look good. Can we agree with that? Yeah, okay. I come from a different perspective though. First and foremost, you go back 100 years ago and perspectives on leadership were different. We're going to talk about perspectives today. Perspectives of leadership were different. It's best summarized by what, Thomas Carlyle would have called 200 years ago, great men idea of leadership. So 200 years ago, Thomas Carlyle said, it's great men who create history. Who are these great men? These great men are people like Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, Napoleon Bonaparte. These were the great men. These weren't managers. These were the great men. Thomas Carlyle's idea, great men create history. I think differently. I think history puts good and great men in certain places. So with that in mind, I know my talk says demystifying leadership. That's not what we're going to do. We're not going to talk about different types of leadership. We're going to talk about a very specific kind of leadership, the specific kind of leadership that everybody would have thought leadership was 200 years ago, before business schools came around. We're going to talk about transformational leadership, demystifying transformational leadership. What is transformational leadership? What is required to be a transformational leader? So before we go any further, I'm going to show you a few pictures. Everybody knows this guy? Right, very famous. I think the richest man in the world right now, right? Probably. Or maybe he's number 2 now. Now it's Mr. Adani's number 1. I don't know. Probably, right? It keeps on changing. But in my business classes, in my management classes, when I ask for names of leaders, almost unanimously this person's name comes up. Do you guys agree? Yeah. Some of you agree. Fantastic, wonderful. He is super famous, right? How about this guy? One of the best actors of our time, right? We all know him. Do we identify him as a leader? Maybe not, maybe yes, some of us, right? Maybe equally famous. I'm not going to use, local names and pictures, obviously. We've got issues in this country. See, the thing is, most people today would argue, at least the first, if not the latter two, as leaders. I would argue otherwise. And by the end of this lecture or this talk, I'll clarify why I don't consider these people leaders. They are celebrities, there's no doubt. Kim Kardashian, I think. Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't know her well enough, to know her name by heart. But she must have tens, if not hundreds of millions of followers, right? Same with, as most of you are followers. Fair enough, I don't know what exactly you're following. They're celebrities. There's a difference between celebrity and leader. This picture though, Nelson Mandela. I'm sure most of you know. I mean, some of you might not be old enough. I don't know. Yeah, yes, Nelson Mandela. Any argument Nelson Mandela was a leader? Any argument? No, right? Mao Zedong, you guys know who Mao Zedong was, Chairman Mao, right? Led China into communism in 1949, was also responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of people. But any argument he was a leader? Maybe not. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, the man, apart from Gandhi the movie, of course, that we believe led the Indian subcontinent into independence. We have no arguments, at least about the latter three, that these people are leaders. Why not? And why we consider them transformation leaders? These are things we're going to talk about today. So, 100 years of research in leadership has thrown out a few things, or thrown about a few things. It says leaders come with certain traits. This is a basic list. There's a longer list, but these are the main things that come out. And I'm not talking about random stuff. Like, I picked up at the bazaar yesterday. Somebody, shop power. No. These are from hardcore research, the skills people think leaders have. You'll see one of them is physical attractiveness. Now you ask yourself, how many people think Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was very physically attractive? No disrespect. If you find him attractive, that's absolutely fine. But Abraham Lincoln, if you know the name, how many people think he was very physically attractive? Reputation, personality, social skills, integrity, that's a very, very important one. Okay. The reason we need to look at these things is because there's leadership schools as well, all over the place, right? Universities, education centers, corporate houses give you leadership training. So, can we pick up these skills? If we pick up these skills, do we automatically become a leader? These are important questions to answer, right? And a lot of people, especially about 100 years ago, Marx, what he did was he combined all of these and called this charisma. So charisma is, close to godliness. You think about Greek mythology, you think about Roman mythology, you think about Hindu mythology, you think about the gods, you think about Arjuna, you think about Achilles. What do you think about? You think about extra human qualities. They're above and beyond the regular human being. That's charisma. That's what Max Weber meant. So charismatic leadership, transformation leadership go hand in hand. Now, you could argue, wait a minute, we can't be Achilles, we can't be Arjuna, two arrows at the same time, hitting two different targets, right? If you are aware of, you are asking for good. I'm sure none of you have ever tried a bow and arrow, have you? I hope not. So, charisma, then we can't all be leaders, can we? Probably not, because charisma, it seems, can't be taught. Some people have argued, and very, very strongly argued, that leadership has a huge genetic aspect to it. And this is kind of true, because a lot of these things that you see over here, empathy, novelty seeking, or risk seeking, your cognitive ability, the level of extrovert, think about it. Can you be an introvert and be a leader? Can you be scared of talking to people and lead people into action? Can that happen? No. And a lot of these things we know for a fact are about 60 to 80% dependent not on sociability, but on your genes. So then you could argue leadership is genetic. Either you're genetically a leader or you aren't. Right? So, two different perspectives. One, you can talk to be a leader. Two, you have to be born a leader. I'll give you a third perspective. Leadership is not about any of this. Leadership is about the people being led. It is the people being led, and this is a new perspective. Not new perspective as in I'm the first person presenting it to you, but this is a fresh perspective compared to the ones I was just presenting 2 minutes ago. Leadership is forged by the people who are being led. People being led. There are groups of people. They want to get somewhere. To get somewhere, they have a dream. This is a dream we call vision. A leader, a lot of people have argued, including Bass and Burns, people who talk about transformation leadership, argued that it's the leader who brings you the vision. They tell you. So you talk about Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, he tells you, kick the British out. You get a Mao Zedong, he tells you, empower the peasants. You get a Nelson Mandela, he tells you, get rid of apartheid. That's not really how it works though. See what happens. First and foremost, you get groups of people with grievances. So you go to India in the late 19th century. You go to India in the early 20th century. There were big groups of people who were unhappy with British rule, who were unhappy with the way their lives were led. Let's come to a local example. I know I said I'd eschew local examples, but that was about influencers. Let's come to local examples now. Let's talk about the 1960s. We had groups of people with grievances. We had industrial workers with grievances because there wasn't money coming. We had the educated urban youth who didn't have jobs. You had to go to West Pakistan for jobs. They had genuine grievances. Different groups with genuine grievances. When different groups with genuine grievances get big enough, they form movements. And from 1964 onwards, again a Bangladeshi example, we had movements. In 1966, we had movements in the industrial sector, we had movements in the peasant sector. Mostly in history books we talk about student sector movements because those were urban based and they could write better. It's just that simple. But we got those movements. Once those movements come together, these movements seek what Gramsci or Lackler would call a new hegemony. They seek a new system. And this new system is almost always reached. But when reaching this new system, you need somebody at the front. It is these movements that pick the somebody at the front. It is these movements that picked the somebody at the front. In the 40s, there was Mao Zedong in China. It was these movements that picked Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. And it was these movements that picked Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. But they don't pick at random. They don't pick at random. You gotta show suffering and sacrifice. From 1949 to 1971, or 1970 rather, a span of 21 years, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was incarcerated for 13 years. From 1949 to 1970, Abdul Hamid Khan Bhashani was incarcerated for more than 10 years. From 1920 till his death, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi suffered the whole time. He was incarcerated many times, but when I say suffering, I mean, sort of hunger strikes and so on and so forth, suffered the whole time. Talk about Mao Zedong, any leader, Nelson Mandela, any leader you look at, they were picked by the people, by these groups with grievances, forged these movements. They were picked by these people because they had this clear history of believing in the same thing, the people's vision, not their vision, the people's vision. And they'd shown this suffering and sacrifice. They didn't have to be good looking. They didn't have to have a lot of the things that, trait approach theorists talk about, or your DNA approach theorists talk about. But they did believe and they did suffer. There is a dark side. Actually, there are two different dark sides. Whenever you try to form a new hegemony, it is against somebody else. There is an other. So, when we talk about leadership, when we talk about transformation leadership, it's difficult to argue for, but it is also a clear case that a person like Adolf Hitler also did the same. But he picked another, right? The Jewish minority. You could even argue today Narendra Modi is the same. And he has picked other, the minority in current India. So there is a dark side, because when you forge these hegemonies, there is the other. There is another dark side. Look at Mao Zedong. When all of this power is concentrated in that one hegemon, in that one person, in that one figurehead, the charismatic, the transformational leader, things can go wrong, as it did in China, as it did in Russia. Look at Russia right now, under President Putin. So there are dark sides. But having said that, if you can stay away from the dark side, leadership, transformation leadership, is really about belief. It's really about sacrifice. Hence, true leadership, it is not beyond any of you. If I finish with one thing today, I finish with one thing. You believe and you sacrifice. Anyone here can be a true transformational leader. Thank you very much.